Welcome to tonight's Nightmare Junkie's scary video. Are you ready to be plunged into the depths of fear? To enter a world where terror reigns and darkness prevails? A place where nightmares become reality and the unknown lurks around every corner. I present to you the House of Terrors. Tiffany was driving to her sister's house for a much-needed visit. She had been looking forward to catching up with her sister and spending some quality time together. Tiffany was getting restless. She had been driving for hours, and she was getting closer and closer to her sister's house. She was excited to catch up with her sister and spend some quality time together, but she was also eager to get there as quickly as possible. That's when she saw it. A sign for a shortcut that her GPS was suggesting. It promised to cut off some time from her trip, and Tiffany was tempted to take it. She thought to herself, what could go wrong? And took the turn. As she started down the new road, she immediately noticed that something was different. The scenery changed from green fields and rolling hills to dense forest and towering mountains. The road became narrower and bumpier, and Tiffany was having a hard time seeing where she was going. But she pressed on, hoping to make up some time. It wasn't long before things started to go wrong. Her car started to sputter and shake, and then it suddenly died. Tiffany tried to restart the engine, but it wouldn't budge. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no cell phone service and no help in sight. Tiffany tried to assess the situation. She didn't want to abandon her car, but she also didn't want to stay there for long. That's when she saw the house in the distance. She thought it might be her best chance for help, so she gathered her things and started walking towards it. As she approached the house, she felt a chill run down her spine. The house looked old and abandoned, and there was an eerie feeling about it. But Tiffany was desperate for help, so she mustered up the courage to knock on the door. As Tiffany knocked on the door, she heard a strange, shuffling sound coming from inside. She hesitated for a moment, but she was too desperate for help to turn back now. She pushed the door open and stepped inside and yelled, "Hello, is anyone here?" There was no response. The first thing she noticed was the musty, damp smell. It was as if the house had been closed up for years and a thick layer of dust covered everything. She cautiously made her way down the hallway, peeking into doorways as she passed. The rooms were all empty, but they were filled with eerie, unsettling objects. Tiffany saw old, cobweb-covered dolls, creepy paintings, and strange artifacts that she couldn't identify. She had a growing sense of unease, but she pressed on, hoping to find someone who could help her. Suddenly, she heard a sound coming from the basement. She yelled hello again, but still no response. She cautiously made her way down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest with every step she took. At the bottom of the stairs, she found a room that was lit by a single flickering candle. In the center of the room was a figure, shrouded in shadows. Tiffany took a step forward, and the figure slowly turned to face her. She could see that it was a woman, dressed in tattered clothing and with long, stringy white hair. The woman's face was twisted in a grotesque expression, and her eyes were dark and empty. The woman spoke in a low, whispery voice. "Why have you come here?" Tiffany was too scared to answer, but she managed to stammer out a plea for help. The woman cocked her head to the side, studying Tiffany intently. "Help." The woman repeated, her voice growing more sinister. "I can give you all the help you need, but you must pay the price." Tiffany's heart was pounding in her chest, and she was filled with a sense of dread. She realized that she had made a terrible mistake by coming to this house. She started to back away slowly, but the woman lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "You can't leave." The woman hissed, "You're mine now." Just then, an old man burst into the room, and the woman vanished into thin air. "Did she touch you?" the man asked with a creepy voice. Tiffany was shocked by the man's voice. It was different, almost menacing. She looked at him with fear and realized that something was wrong. "Did she touch you?" he repeated, this time even more ominously. Suddenly, Tiffany remembered something from her encounter with the woman. She had said to her something that Tiffany couldn't quite make out at the time. But now, it all became clear. The woman said in an eerie voice, "You're mine now." Tiffany's heart sank as she remembered the words of the woman. She felt like she had been marked, like she would never be free from the woman's grasp. She told the old man about the woman's words. The man then said, "I'm sorry, there is nothing I can do for you now. You must leave this house now, and never come back again before it's too late." Tiffany felt a chill run down her spine as the hooded-figured man spoke those words. She had a sense that something terrible was about to happen, and she knew that she had to leave that house as quickly as possible. She turned to leave, but as she did, she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. She spun around, but there was no one there, and yet she could hear the lady's whispers in the dark, getting louder and more insistent. "You're mine now." Tiffany shook her head, fighting against the whispers and the fear that was creeping into her heart. With a fierce determination, she stepped out of the house and into the night. She started running away from the house as fast as she could. She finally found a road and started running down it, not looking back. The wind was howling and the trees were bending in the wind as if trying to reach out and grab her. But Tiffany was too fast, too determined to let the darkness catch her. She ran for what felt like hours until she finally came upon a car passing by on the road. Tiffany was relieved to see another human being, and she ran towards the car, waving her arms frantically to get their attention. The car pulled over, and an elderly couple peered out the window at her. "Dear, are you okay?" the woman asked, concern etched on her face. Yes, Tiffany panted. "I need a ride, please. I've been running for so long, and I need to get away from here." The couple looked at each other, then back at Tiffany. "Of course, dear," the man said. "Hop in. We'll take you where you need to go." Tiffany asked if they could drop her at a gas station, and she could call her sister from there. The elderly couple dropped her off at the nearest gas station, and Tiffany thanked them for their help. Tiffany then called her sister for help. Her sister listened intently, her voice growing more and more worried as Tiffany spoke. "Tiffany, that sounds dangerous," she said when Tiffany had finished. "You need to come home now." "Where are you? I'll come and get you." "I don't know," Tiffany said, looking around the unfamiliar countryside. "I'm not sure where I am. The couple who gave me a ride just dropped me off at a gas station called Super X." "Okay, stay there," her sister said. "I'll call you back in a few minutes and let you know when I can get there." Tiffany agreed, and the line went dead. She sighed and hung up the phone, looking out at the passing cars and the unfamiliar scenery. She felt a sense of relief knowing that her sister was on her way. Tiffany was relieved to be safe, but the events of that night continued to haunt her. She tried to move on, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the woman's twisted face and heard her whispery voice saying, "You're mine now." Despite her attempts to forget, Tiffany became obsessed with finding out the truth about the House of Terrors. She started to do some research, and she discovered that the house had a dark history. It had been abandoned for decades, and rumours circulated of strange disappearances and supernatural occurrences that took place within its walls. Tiffany felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that she may have narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. She couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was still out there, waiting for her to return. As Tiffany dug deeper into the history of the house, she found out that it was once owned by a powerful and cruel witch doctor who had used it as a prison for those she deemed deserving of a slow and painful death. It was said that the witch doctor's spirit still lingered within the house, tormenting and possessing those who dared to enter. Tiffany began to experience strange and terrifying visions. She was haunted by the voice of the woman, and she had nightmares about being trapped in the house forever. She became consumed by fear and paranoia. As the days passed, Tiffany's fears only grew stronger. She felt like she was being watched, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pursued by the hooded figure she had seen in the house. She was constantly on edge, jumping at every little noise and imagining that she saw the woman's ghostly face in every shadowy corner. Despite her sister's encouragement to see a doctor, Tiffany refused. She knew that the visions and nightmares she was experiencing were the result of her brush with magic, and she didn't believe that a doctor could help her. Instead, she threw herself into her studies, hoping to find some way to banish the ghostly apparition that haunted her dreams. She read every book on magic and the paranormal she could find, trying to understand what had happened to her and what she could do to make it stop. But the more she learned, the more afraid she became, for she had stumbled upon a dark and dangerous world of magic, and she wasn't sure if she would ever be able to escape its clutches. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Tiffany became increasingly isolated. She stopped going out, stopped seeing her friends, and spent all her time holed up in her room, researching and studying. Her sister was worried about her, but Tiffany refused to listen to her pleas to get help, for she was consumed by fear and paranoia, and she didn't know if she would ever be able to escape the old woman haunting her. One night, as Tiffany was deep in her studies, she heard a knock at her door. She hesitated, fear gripping her heart, but finally summoned the courage to answer it. When she opened the door, she was met by the hooded-figured old lady from the abandoned house, her face hidden in the shadows. "You are mine now," the figure said, her voice low and menacing. Tiffany took a step back, her heart racing with fear. "You don't have a choice," the figure said, stepping closer. "You have been marked by my magic, and you now belong to me, whether you like it or not." With a flick of her wrist, the figure sent Tiffany flying across the room, slamming into the wall. Dazed and confused, she looked up to see the figure looming over her, with her eyes glowing with malevolent power. "There is no escape from me," she said. "You will belong to me forever." Tiffany closed her eyes, fear gripping her heart. She knew that she was powerless against the figure, and that her fate was sealed. She was lost to the world of magic, and there was no turning back. But as she lay there, she suddenly remembered something she had read in one of her books. It was a spell to banish evil, to cast out the dark magic that threatened to consume her. Gathering all her strength, Tiffany whispered the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. The figure hesitated, the power of the spell weakening her grip on her. And with a final burst of energy, Tiffany broke free, standing up and facing the figure head-on. "Be gone," she shouted, the power of the spell echoing in the room. "Return to the darkness from which you came." The figure hesitated for a moment, her eyes blazing with anger and frustration. And then, with a final snarl, she vanished into thin air like she did in the basement of the old house. Tiffany stumbled back, her heart racing with relief and exhilaration. She had done it. She had defeated the dark magic and the old lady. And for the first time in months, she felt free, or was she? Thanks for watching our first series of House of Terrors. Be sure to look out for part 2 coming soon.